Welcome to MyLife Chassidus Applied, episode 540. This program is in loving memory of Miriam Bas Eliyahu Altes, Aleh Shalom, and in merit of Baruch ben Yomen ben Menucha Lana Altes. It's also in schus and merit of Yekusiel ben Leah Rachel and Rachel Bas Liba Farkash, dedicated by Pinchas Todres ben Miriam and Sarah Bas Rachel Altes. We are in the final week, entering into the Chag HaGeula, Pesach, Zman Cheduseinu, which will be literally 1 week from now, or one Matzah Shabbos this year. It's an unusual Kvias schedule where Erev Pesach is on Shabbos. And therefore, Matzah Shabbos is the first Seder, going into Sunday and the rest of the Yom Tov. So this program will be specially dedicated, a special edition, Pesach edition. Being that the next 2 weeks, Sundays, are going to be Yom Tov, so this will be the last program until we return a week after Pesach and continue the regular schedule of MyLife Chassidus Applied. So we have a lot to cover. Pesach, all the days of Pesach. Before that, we will talk about Yud Alef Nissan, the Rebbe's birthday. Erev Pesach is also the birthday of the Rambam. So we have a lot in store for you, and look forward to a very meaningful and inspiring, and above all, Chassidus Applied, being able to apply this time of the year into our personal lives, our psychological, emotional lives, addressing the issues of our time. As the Alter Rebbe says, upon which the Tanya, which is the written Torah Shebiksav, the written Torah of Chassidus, is based upon. To explain that, and by extension, all of Chassidus, applying it to our lives, Beficha b'levavcha la'asesei. So with that, let us begin in order. We'll go in order of the days. Yud Alef Nissan is the Rebbe's birthday, the 123rd birthday of the Rebbe, born Tafrei Samach Beis, Erev Pesach. Erev Shabbos that year. Yud Alef Nissan was Erev Shabbos, just a few days before Pesach. The Rambam's birthday is Erev Pesach. So let's begin with that, and we'll move from that into Pesach itself, and try to cover as much as we can with the time that we have. It's a good opportunity as well to welcome those that are listening for the first time. Of course, those that are listening more than for the first time. And ChassidusApplied.com is a website dedicated entirely to this very purpose, applying Chassidus, ChassidusApplied.com, where you can submit your questions completely anonymously. There's a forum there, as well as access the archives of previous programs. Now there's 539 previous programs, plus essays and other submissions from different individuals who, over the years, wrote essays on applying Chassidus to life, as well as other resources on Ayin Beis and on Samach Vav, and other Chassidus Shemamorim, all with the goal of applying it to our personal lives. So, Yud Alef Nissan, the birthday. We know a birthday is Mazolei Gever. It's the day when a neshama enters into this world, and especially a neshama klolis of a Rebbe, and our Rebbe, the seventh generation. So it's of course unique in that sense. So how do we honor the Rebbe's 123rd birthday? So let's first talk about what the birthday is. Now, just for the record, we all know that birthdays were not always celebrated, except by, as the Rebbe would always say, Yechidus Gula, people did it, and was more in private. But over the years, especially the Rebbe began to emphasize and encourage people to celebrate their birthdays. But how? Through Torah mitzvahs, through Afabrengen, through Achlotas, through learning Torah, increasing in davening, adding tzedakah, all things connected to Kedusha. Because the day is Mazolei Gever, that's when you're mazel, when you're so-called, you can call the root of the neshama is empowered, and an auspicious day, and therefore it is a special day, especially after, the Rebbe encouraged us over all the years, but especially after the Istalkus and the passing of the Rebbetzin, whose birthday is Chafei Adar, which according to Rabbi Yeshua is the birthday of the world. There's the 2 days, Rabbi Loza and Rabbi Yeshua, which is Chafei Adar or Chafei El. So her birthday corresponds to, according to that opinion, the birthday of the world. And the Rebbe then came out with a mifsi Yom Haledes, with directives of how to celebrate the Yom Haledes and the birthday. Just for the record, in case anyone is interested, we actually prepared, Meaningful Life Center, my organization, a birthday guide that tells you how to take your meaningful day and make it even more meaningful. So it really takes those directives and translates them into simple English that can be used. It's a free birthday guide. If you just go to meaningfullife.com, type in birthday guide, and you can access it, print it out, and both aesthetically beautiful, structured, with a whole insights of how to celebrate a birthday, your own or family member or friend, and so on. So of course, a Rebbe's birthday is particularly unique. See, like say Chayel, the birthday of both the Shnei Ma'eres Agdel and the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, both on Chayel, the years Nachas and Kohos, respectively. So we can learn from that the power and how the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe would make such a big thing about that day. So Yud Alef Nissan, the birthday of the Rebbe, the day when the Rebbe Shlichus began, B'chaim Be'elam Ba'almedidan, B'chaim Chayusei Ba'almedidan, his life in this world. So it has that power. And it gives us power because on Neshama Klolis, on Rebbe, like Moshe Rabbeinu, so he includes and encompasses whatever is coming to him, also extends to his students and to his disciples and to his chassidim and to the whole generation. So once you know that, then it's very clear what the Hira is. How do we honor this birthday, especially this year, the 123rd birthday, is by doing exactly what the Rebbe would do, which is his Avodah. What was his Avodah? As he established right at the beginning of when the Rebbe assumed leadership, formally Yud Shvat Tovshin Yud Alef, 1951, that this is the seventh generation, the generation that will usher in the Geula, like the seventh generation from Avram Avinu, Moshe Rabbeinu, ushering in the Geula then, and then building the Beis Hamikdash, the Mishkan, V'shachanti B'seicham, that we will usher in the Geula and build the Beis Hamikdash, and with the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, V'shachanti B'seicham in our time. So that's the overall, everything we can do, and through our Aveda, Maseinu V'Avedaseinu, in the language of Tanya, that prepares the world, prepares ourselves for the Gula Mitis Vashlem. But namely, the Rebbe, with focus was on Yefutza Ma'nesecha Chutza, teaching and spreading Chassidus. This is how we honor the birthday. We're doing exactly that. You honor it by doing what the Rebbe would want us to do, which is through Torah and mitzvahs and spread the Afotzas HaTorah v'Achsidus everywhere we can reach, including, of course, the Mivtzoyim that the Rebbe established, the 10 Mivtzoyim, which are starting with Mivtzah Tefillin, Mivtzah Mezuzah, Mivtzah Torah, Mivtzah Bayis Mol Sefardim, Mitzvah Tzedakah, and then the 3 special mitzvahs, Mivtzoyim for especially for the women and the girls, which is Neshek and Kashrus Achila V'Shtiyah and Taras HaMishpacha, and the final 2, Chinuch and Avis Yisrael. And of course also the Rebbe's Takonis, which are many. But the one that is that was the Rebbe established actually Achar Pesach Tovshim Mem Daled 1984, the learning of Rambam, either 3 chapters a day or 1 chapter a day or Sefer HaMitzvahs. So by committing to these things, you're doing exactly the Rebbe, this is what he invested in. So on the day of the Rebbe's birthday, that's how we honor it. By strengthening all these things, increasing in each one. And not just for yourself, but also reaching others. This is the general directive the Rebbe would always give us in general, and especially when he came in Alef Nissan, when people ask, what can we do for you? That's the greatest gift that Rebbe said. Increasing and learning Torah and doing mitzvahs and learning Chassidus and learning and spreading Chassidus. To the point, I'll share this, an interesting anecdote. In the year when the Rebbe turned 80 years old, it was Tovshim Mem Beis. It was 1982. The Rebbe was born 1902, 1982. Tovshim Mem Beis, the Rebbe was born Tafrei Samach Beis. So months before Yud Alef Nissan, since it was a special mark, 80 years, by 70 years it was a big thing by the Rebbe. So I thought that would be worthwhile to suggest something that we can do in honor of the Rebbe's birthday. So around Chanukah time, which was a little early, uncharacteristic, usually people wake up a few days before. Around Hanukkah time, a little before Hanukkah, I believe, I wrote to the Rebbe a note. I was working then in the Rebbe's Fabrengens, the Siches, head of Vada Nochsat Mimim. I was a chayzer and a maniach of the Rebbe's teachings, the Rebbe's Torah, remembering and then writing down the main writer of these Fabrengens. So I wrote to the Rebbe a note that in honor of the upcoming Shmeinim Shana of Yud Alef Nissan, we're considering printing all the Maimorim, all the Hasidic discourses that the Rebbe delivered on Yud Alef Nissan and connected with Yud Alef Nissan. At that point, there was maybe 20, maybe 25, I don't remember exactly. Remember the Rebbe said a Maimer Adnai Svosei Tivtach at his 50th birthday, Tavshin Yud Beis. And then there's the Maimer Tavshin Chav Beis. And then there's the Maimer Tavshin Lamed Aleph, and on from then till this was now Mem Beis, all the Maimorim that the Rebbe had said. The Rebbe responded. He wrote in his Ksav Yad, he responded, Ein Azman Groma Le'agiyam. There's no time for him to edit it. So Yatziyu suggests something that doesn't need my editing. Which was, of course, we would have loved that the Rebbe edited, but the fact that Rebbe said Yatziyu, that was not a common thing. That Rebbe actually said, suggest something. So I began to call everybody I know to try to figure out what would be a good suggestion. I wanted to get people's true bereviers, different people's opinions. And finally, after speaking maybe to 20, 30 people who are either Techinyanim or Chassid, people I had access to, and so I wrote the Rebbe a note that Api the Rebbe is saying Yatziyu. So maybe a few days later, within the week for sure, I responded to the Rebbe. And I wrote that this is the consensus of, after getting advice from others and counsel from others, suggestion is to publish a book which would consist of two parts, Shar Teira and Shar Maisa, Gate of Teira and Gate of Maisa. The Teira part would include, remember we had to do something the Rebbe would not have to edit, would include things, the kapitel of the Rebbe's, the new kapitel Pei, was 80, and kapitel Pei Aleph, 81, in Tehillim, with the commentaries, and especially with the commentaries of the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek has a sefer, the Shimas at Tzemach Tzedek al Tehillim, what was later published as Yal Oyer. This is Tehillim the Rebbe would use whenever he said Tehillim, and it has the Tzemach Tzedek's, the Shimas commentary on that kapitel, plus other commentary on that kapitel, plus things about Shmeinim Shana. We had found a few things from the Rebbe's father, a few things in other places in Chassidus. And good. Shar HaMaisa would be a selection of articles, and I think I even wrote photos, that describe the Rebbe's Pa'ulas activities throughout the world. So it would like capture the Rebbe, 80 years, the Rebbe is both I said like Torah and also the Pa'ulas activities, Shar HaMaisa. Okay, the Rebbe wrote back an answer, long answer. So first he addressed our suggestion. He said, Ach v'rak, only a kevis teirani. No Shar HaMaisa, he doesn't want any activities. Guess the PR, if you wish. Only Torah. And the Rebbe added things to what we wrote, that we should also publish in there the directive of saying the kapitel Tehillim that corresponds to your years, and a few other things that the Rebbe added. Then, at the bottom of the page, and this was the long, and this is interesting how the Rebbe works. He wanted us to suggest Asus Tata, but now that we suggested, now the Rebbe is coming with his suggestion to publish a special edition of Tanya. And the Rebbe writes out in detail what kind of Tanya he wants. A Tanya, the Rebbe wrote even the Bendlach, this is the bookmarks that are printed, like the ribbon that's printed inside the books, and which Tanya to use, and what the Chiddush would be that it would also include the Sharblots, the cover pages of all the Tanyas printed in the world. Now, it wasn't as many as today, because the Rebbe had not come out yet till 2 years later to print a Tanya in every city. But there were a lot of them. And again, in detail. A whole thing. It's already been publicized. If anybody's interested in getting a copy of the Rebbe's handwriting, the Rebbe's notes on this letter that I wrote to the Rebbe, just send us a question, but give your email address and we'll be happy to send it to you. Or your phone number, we can WhatsApp it to you. Again, at chassidusapplied.com. But remember, it's anonymous. We don't have your address unless you give it to us. But a very interesting answer. All the COVID, Yud Alef Nissan, Tov Shem Mem Beis. Now, we didn't know at the time what would happen next. So I'll share with you the final part of it. So this was all months before Yud Alef Nissan. So we began to prepare a Kavitz Yud Alef Nissan, which came out then, that included everything that Rebbe wanted in there. The Tehillim, the Tzemach Tzedek, everything else that Rebbe added. That was a Kavitz. Yud Alef Nissan that year. It's coming closer. It was a big day, 80th birthday. So when it got closer, I don't know how close, but at some point, we found out that Rebbe's set to print thousands, maybe 10,000, I don't remember how many copies, 10,000 copies of the Tanya. And at the Fabrengen, at the end of the Fabrengen, the Rebbe hand personally distributed to every person, to every man, woman, and child, to the point that it went all the way till the morning, the distribution. There were people who woke up, weren't even at the Fabrengen, they came, they got the Tanya. That Tanya, that all came out of this whole interaction. Interesting. So besides the fact, everything I just shared, it's also interesting to note that, usually by birthdays, you give people the birthday person gets gifts. Here the Rebbe was giving gifts. Giving, always giving. Besides all the other lessons you can learn from this. Thought it was appropriate to share and cover Yud Alef Nissan. So what can we give the Rebbe? Torah. That's what he wants, Torah. Learning Torah, fulfilling Torah, mitzvahs, spreading Torah, everything we discussed earlier. Another person asks, well, since it's also the 123rd birthday, so of course it's going to be Kapitel Kuf Chav Daled, and for the record, the Kavitz Yud Alef Nissan is being printed till this day. Every year the Bochrim, they come to me for direction and guidance, but they do a good job. Every year they continue the same custom to print a Kavitz Yud Alef Nissan on the Kapitel with all the Mefarshim Tzemach Tzedek and all the Rabbeim. That's what it developed into, including the Arizal, including the Rebbe's father. So you can see that around, they print it every year. Now, what is the significance of the number 11? Yud Aleph. Someone asked. Did the Rebbe once say, in relation to his birthday on the 11th of Nisan, that the number 11 is significant because it represents an energy higher than the natural order? Yes, indeed. So Chassidus explains, the Esser Sfiris is Esser, a Mispar Shalom. It's a complete cycle. 10 Sfiris. There's the 10 Maimoros, Asara Maimoros, the 10 statements that God used to create the world. There's the Asara Sadibras, the 10 commandments. You find 10. It's a complete number. As Sefardim write, why it's a Mispar Shalom, the Rambam in his Sefer, and other places. Pardes, the Ramak. 11, it refers to one more, higher than Seder Ishtalshalos. So 10 spheres, so Keser, when Keser is not counted among the 10 spheres, would be like the 11th. But you don't call it a 11th sphere, because there's only 10 spheres, not 11, not 9, as the Sefer Yetziyas says. So it refers to higher than Ishtalshalos. So Amshacha higher than Ishtalshalos. Yud Alef Samamoni HaKteris. The Kteris are 11 different types of spices. So at times 11 refers to something in L'umazeh, because their chayes comes from Makif, it says in some MyLife Chassidus. But 11 in Gedusha is a level higher than Ishtalshalos. And indeed, in a number of places the Rebbe emphasized it, including in different brachas. The Rebbe would give a bracha every year, a blessing, a Yud Alef Nissan. There's also the famous Sikha, Tovshin Nun Beis, Chav Beis Shvat, which Chav Beis is twice 11, the Rebbetzins Yartzeit. So the Rebbe talks there about the Mispar 10, Yud Shvat, Tovshin Yud, then Tovshin Yud Aleph, and Yud Alef Nissan, and then Chav Beis, as different kufas in the Amshach of higher than Ishtalshalos into Ishtalshalos. So that's the connection. And it makes sense, because the Rebbe is also, Yud Alef Nissan is also the Nasi Lebnei Osher. The Rebbe explains, Madani Melech. Osher brings Madani Melech, the pleasures, the delights of the king. It's more than just what's necessary, more than just the structured cycle, so-called the cycle, the structure of Seder Ishtalshalos. you bring Amshacha that's higher than Seder Ishtalshlus. And in general terms, that's the Geula. If existence is Yud, is around Tzarem HaMoris Nivreil, and this is Amshacha of Yud Alef into the Yud. Okay. And finally, is there a connection to the Rambam's birthday and Erev Pesach? So the Rebbe himself did connect, and obviously most of the obvious way is through the Hatakone that the Rebbe established the learning of Rambam, special chvivus and special preciousness that the Rebbe had to the Rambam, and being that the Rambam and the Rebbe's birthdays are really a few days apart from each other. So different Chassidim have suggested that the Rebbe himself, even though we say that Rebbe Rashab is the Rambam of Chassidus, but the Rebbe himself also is a Rambam in the sense where he brought together Kol Chelkei HaTeireh, not just of Chassidus, Pshat, Remez, Drus, Sod, and many other similarities that you can bring, similar to what the Rebbe speaks about when he speaks about the Alter Rebbe and the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe, who also, Chav Tevis is the Stalkus Ilula of the Rambam, Chav Dalet Tevis, 3 days later, is the Stalkus Ilula of the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe compares the two. They both wrote on Nigla and Pnimius. The Alter Rebbe, of course, the Rambam is Mishnah Teir Yad HaChazaka, and he wrote Meir Nevuchim. The Alter Rebbe, Shulchan Aruch, and Tanya, and all the Maimonic Chassidus. And both leaders, not just teachers, not just educators, leaders of their generation. So you could apply the same idea to the Rebbe. Bringing together Kol HaTeireh Kula, which is what the Rambam does, which is exactly what the Rebbe does in his Sichos and Maimorim. The Rebbe's entire Teireh is bringing Kol HaTeireh Kula, Teireh Achas, like the Rambam did, and as well as the leadership, dealing with the challenges of the time. You could even say, and interesting to know, that Rambam was a doctor as well, and the Rebbe also had his knowledge in the secular world, including his degrees. Not that the Rebbe was necessarily, like the Rebbe once said, it's not what I hold dear to me, but it's a fact, because the Rebbe was being prepared and prepared himself to lead a world that would need that type of knowledge, and the Rambam is like the Rambam in his time. And many people call the Rebbe Meir Nevuchim as well, who gave direction and guidance to many of the confused and many of the people in our generation, either ignorant or did not know through the thousands of letters and hours of yechidus and directives and guidance and answers to questions and so on. Okay, so there's a perfect transition from that into Pesach. I don't think I've seen from the Rebbe, I mean, he has spoken about Yud Alef Nissan many times, sugis around Pesach, but is there a special connection? The Rebbe is born in the Chedesh HaGeula, obviously the month of Geula, just a few days before Pesach. So you have to say that the Rebbe's Aveda has some connection, the time that he's born, the time that where he came, as I said, the Aveda Elam to this world, you have to say has a connection to Pesach. So of course the Rebbe, the concept of Pesach, which is Pesach, Medalag Alahorim, Mekapetz Alagvos, to go Lechatchila Riba, to go above the limits, go to Yud Aleph, higher than Yud, is a cornerstone of the Rebbe's Aveda. So I'm sure there are many lessons that we can learn from that. But let's go into Pesach, and that itself will be those lessons, or part of those lessons. So I'll break it down into several sections. Many questions have come in. I don't believe I can cover them all. I'll try to cover as many as I can. But remember, this being the Ready This Is Now, we're talking now, we began this program, 540, we're talking about over 12 years ago. So there's 12 years of programs on Pesach, which you can find in the archives at chassidusapplied.com. So let's begin with the first section. I think appropriate is to start personalizing the experience. So above all, everything with the most common expression that Rebbe would use in all his Farbrengens was Teireh Meloshen Hira. Teireh from the word directive, guidance. Hira, he gives us guidance, he directs us. So it's not just a Sefer, the Torah, that is, a holy book that talks about what happened back then. It's Hiras for our time. Or in the language of the Zohar, Stakel Baraisa Bar Almi, you look in Torah, you know how the God created the world, and that's And a human being looks in Torah and knows how to preserve and fulfill the purpose of the world. Or in the Lashon of the Medrash, the Torah's blueprint of existence. So what does that tell you? That everything, every word, every letter in Torah has to be a lesson in our lives. And especially when you're talking about Reishel Regolim, the head of all the Yom Tov and Pesach. Rishonu lachem l'chodshei hashana, achedesh hazeh lachem. This is the beginning. Everything starts with Pesach, Chedesh Harishon, the first month of the lunar cycle. So what is the overall theme of Pesach that's personal? So let's begin with a question. Why do the Ten Commandments begin with, I am your God, Anechi Hashem Elokecha, asher yitzisichem Erev Mitzrayim, that took you out of Egypt, and not Asher barasi shamayim v'aretz, that one who created the heaven and earth, Bereshit bara Elokim es hashamayim v'aretz. Like commentaries ask this question. Which seemingly is a much bigger accomplishment, the creation from nothing, ex nihilo, yesh mayin, than take us out of Egypt. Is Hashem trying to teach us a lesson in humility? As someone writes. So this is the second question. Both questions are answered in one fell swoop, if you wish, in one concept. That the Yetziyas Mitzrayim captures the very essence of the entire purpose of existence. Creation is the creation of existence. But what's the purpose? The purpose is Mitzrayim is from the word Mitzarim v'gvulim. Limits and boundaries and constraints. In the language of Chassidus, tzimtzum. Eibishter created the world with that tzimtzum. Because Eireh Ein Sof on its own, all pervasive, it leaves no room for existence. The Eibishter wanted Nesava Kosh Baruch Hu Liyis Baruch Dira B'Tachtenim. He wanted to have a home, Dafke in Tachtenim, the lowest of worlds, as the Alter Rebbe explains in chapter 36 in Tanya. What does the lowest of worlds means? The lowest not in space, lowest in revelation. That it's a dark world. You don't have any Gili Alakus, to the point you actually have the opposite. Forces that defy God. As he uses all the expressions there. And Dafka there, in the world of Mitzarim v'Gvulim, that's what he wants, should be Yetziyas Mitzrayim. That we should elevate the world. And reveal a Lukus, take us out of the limits and not be bound by them. But the first step, they have to create them. You need to have Mitzarim v'Gvulim. You need this Tzimtzumim. So that's the Chiddush. Anechi Hashem Elokecha. I created heaven and earth. That's a dover person. God can create. But even bigger than that is that though he created a world with all its limits, with all its boundaries, with all its mitzarim v'gvulim and lomas v'esterim, he also gives us the power to take us out of there. And that's what we, through our Aveda, access. The ability to transform the world. Or to use an expression that Chassidus brings from a Maimar Chazal. Gedeli ma'aseh tzadikim b'ma'aseh shamayim v'aretz. The Maisa, the actions of tzaddikim, is greater than the creation of heaven and earth. Why? Because as Chassidus puts it, when God creates heaven and earth, he's creating from ayin a yesh. And the tzaddikim are taking from the yesh of existence and turning it into an ayin of elokus. That's even greater, because you're taking the existence God created with the mitzarim v'gvulim and you're turning it to something that's higher than that. In a way you could say, turning from the yud, asara ma'amoris nivrei elam, to the yud aleph, that we discussed earlier. That's higher than Welt. Bringing a lakus, l'mayla me'elamis, into elamis. That's Yetziyas Mitzrayim. And that is the central message. And that's why when we say, B'chol der v'der chayev adam liris esatzmi kilu yotzim Mitzrayim. In every generation, a person has to envision as if they're going out of Mitzrayim. And the Alter Rebbe adds in Perik Mem Zayin and Tanya, B'chol yem v'yem. In every generation, meaning on every day of that generation. That's why we say Zeich Yetziyas Mitzrayim, Schidus Yetziyas Mitzrayim so many times, every day, many times. Because it's the central point. What do you mean envision that you went out of Mitzrayim? Most people were never in Egypt. You could say, to remember that the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, but you should envision like as if you're going out. You're sitting at a Seder table? Exactly. That's the point. Not just Niskarim, but Nasim, to relive it, recreate it, every year in a new way. Because that's the whole purpose, to make a dira b'tachtenim today. To take the Mitzrayim v'gvulim and find a way to free ourselves from there. With the koyach of Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation, the Rebbe, born Yud Alef Nissan. So that's the general gist of personalizing Pesach. Means that we have to look at our Mitzrayim v'gvulim before we sit down to the Seder. I've always used it whenever I ran a Seder with people, and I do it every year actually. I always say, find the Mitzrayim in your life. Everybody has Mitzrayim v'gvulim. It could be personal issues, it could be between shalom bayis issues, it could be between parents and children, between communities, between friends, between strangers, between nations. Find something, and then see the Seder, as I like to call it, 15 steps toward freedom, toward liberation. Every step of the Seder is not just commemorating. You're reliving. This is how you experience Yetziyas Mitzrayim. Avodim Ayinu. But it's also Avodim today, whether it's beruchnias, whether it's psychological, emotional, and how we experience it, b'chol yom v'yom, in every moment in our lives. So someone asked the question, if we must remember the Egyptian exodus every day, why is Pesach only 8 days? It would make more sense for Pesach to be every day all year long. A good question. The truth is, in a broad sense, you could say every question is that way. We're supposed to experience everything. B'chol yom yeh beinecha chadoshim. Every mitzvah, including Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. And b'chol, it's every moment has to be, every time you do it, has to be like a new. B'chol yom yeh beinecha chadoshim. But Pesach, the question is even stronger because Pesach is so central. It captures the very essence of all Aveda, to go out of these Mitzrayim v'gvulim. So the answer is, as the Rebbe asks a similar question, when he says, when you learn MyLife Chassidus, when you learn the Maimorim of Pesach, it says Pesach is the highest, higher than Shavuos and higher than Sukkot. You learn the Maimorim of Shavuos, it says Shavuos is the highest. Sukkot is the highest. So the Rebbe said, because each one in its time is the shar, the gate, like mitzvah to have a zoyer beit fei. All the mitzvahs you have to do. But then there's a mitzvah that's particular right now, relevant either to you or to the time or to the space. So all the mitzvahs are compassed in that. So it's all going through the gate of mitzvah of Pesach when it comes Pesach. So that tells you that obviously all the Tayyag mitzvahs and all the Yom Tov are all year round, all the time, the energy is there. But at the end of the day, we do live in a world of tachtenim, a structured world, with different and time and space is different, and we want to have a time where you really focus completely on that. So much more emphasis. So that's why you have a certain amount of time, whether it's 7 days or 8 days. Certain Yom Tov are 1 day. Achaz Bashani, Yom Kippur. But then, why did the Alter Rebbe not put Chasal Seder Pesach at the end of the Agadah, like we find another Agadah, which means the end? This is the end of the Seder of Pesach, because Pesach, as the Frierdiker Rebbe says, but nimshach ständig, is a perpetual pool. Nimshach always has an effect. An effect, but a day after Pesach, you don't need to eat matzah, and you're allowed to eat chametz. But the energy of Pesach continues on. And that's the answer. So there's a time, like we see many things. You celebrate a birthday, we talked about. Every day a person is born, you can say. When we say in the morning, the expression is chadoshim lepkarim. You're like a new person. But your birthday is a special once a year when the Eibishter, like talks about Rosh Hashanah, an Chodesh comes into existence. But every second is an Chodesh. The Alter Rebbe writes in Shari Yechid V'Amuna that every second, every second it's renewed. So what do you mean Chodesh in Rosh Hashanah? So the answer is 2 points to it. Number one, there's a thing called Chiddush HaYeshenus. Yes, every day is new, but it's renewing that which was there already. But an unprecedented energy, completely different energy that, like he says, Er Chodesh and Mechudesh, that never existed and never will, that's Dafka Rosh Hashanah. Secondly, the second point is that every time has its particular focus. So the fact, for example, every day Hashem designates what parnasa, but once a year, the Reish Hashanah is the Reish, when it's designated for the entire year. That still doesn't take away that every day you unpack it and it could change. So the same thing with Pesach. Cheroseinu. Zman Cheroseinu is the 7-8 days of Pesach. With all the particular mitzvahs and tefillas and everything, we do that. We make a Seder. From that, we're mamshich, so to speak, in microcosm, the Pesach of every day, the Yetziyas Mitzrayim of every day. This is a very common theme, where something is completely focused on that day, it's the main focus. The rest of the time, there's other things to do, but it all is through the lens of Pesach still exists. Okay. More general questions in the context of personalizing the experience. How would you advise me how would you advise me using the extra time on my hands during the Yom Tov season? This Yom Tov season. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, I work along the whole year, and now I have off for Chodesh Nissan. I have a lot of time for extra learning, even after helping my wife. I'm glad you qualified that, because I was going to say that should be the first thing. But I don't know what I want, since there's all these sikhs, all my morim on Pesach, all halachas on Pesach, all gemaras on Pesach, etc. Every time I'm in such a situation, it just becomes one big mishmash for me, and it doesn't work out. Can you please advise me how to limit my overdoing, but still have some goal, like what mimer should I learn, etc.? Okay. So, yes. The first and most important thing is your partner with your Rebbe and with your wife. Pesach coming, there's a lot of work to be done. But as the Rebbe said, it's important to have Seder. You have to be Mesudar. So when we're working, obviously work is important, takes a lot of time. You have more time. So there's a Seder. Every morning, learn some Chassidus. Daven longer because now you have more time, more kavanah. Then afterwards, learn some more. And then either help at home or help with the children. And then there's Gemilas Chasad. You can go on Mitzvah Pesach every day. You can volunteer to go and speak to people about Pesach, help them get the needs that they have for Pesach, invite people for Pesach, help prepare people to understand what is the meaning of Pesach, how to make Pesach relevant to their lives. So I would just create a schedule, literally a daily schedule, where you combine all the above. As far as what to learn, generally we say, b'mokim shali b'chafetz. You learn where your heart desires. So there are some very fundamental maimorim. There's maimorim from the Rebbe on Pesach, beautiful maimorim. There's a Shara Amunah from the Mittler Rebbe on Pesach. There's maimorim of the Alter Rebbe, all the Rabbeim. I recommend choosing a few maimorim from the Alter Rebbe, from the Rebbe rather, where you go into Sefer Maimorim Melukit, but today they also have it in Sefardim in order of the periods of the year, and learn the maimor from the Rebbe. Yom Ashti Chasar Chedesh, Yud Alef Nissan maimor from Tovshin Lamed Aleph. The Rebbe edited it. There are other maimorim. Maimorim from Tovshin Chafei, Pesach Achar Shapesach Tovshin V'Nocha. If you want examples. Always good to learn with someone. It'll make it easier. But even on your own. So I'd make a Seder, literally a Seder. And you just balance every day. Instead of it becoming overwhelmed, write it down even. And you can schedule your Seder around that. Okay. In addition to addressing negative Pesach experiences, can you also focus on positive and beautiful elements? In the past few Sunday podcasts, you have discussed some viewer questions about the negative experiences of cleaning for Pesach and of the Seder. Yes, I was speaking about the dysfunctional, the mechanical, about being obsessed with details and sometimes losing the sight of the neshama, the soul of it all. So this person is writing, I agree there are some negatives and harshness that needs to be abated, but Pesach also has so many beautiful aspects to it that outweigh the negatives. So I'd like to ask you if you can discuss some of those. By all means. I mean, just for the record, usually the questions that come in are not always focusing on affirming the beauty they want. It's a question, a challenge. People grew up in an environment where Pesach was very overwhelming, very demanding and very rigid, and sometimes filled with a lot of anger and stringencies, as I read some of the questions that came in. I'm not defensive here. I'm not feel I need to defend what we did here. Just people, those questions usually are more prominent. But I totally agree, because that's the whole point. The whole point is not just to say it's not negative. It's to say there's such beauty. That's the whole tragedy. And also the blessing. Pesach has such beauty to it. Every custom, every mitzvah I should start with. Every detail of the Seder is all about bringing us personal, emotional, psychological, and spiritual freedom, as we've been discussing. So if you recall, though I read those questions, but at the end of the day, learn how matzah creates humility in your life. Learn how other aspects of the Seder are all a part about personal growth and relevant, exciting. Make it exciting for you, your children, your family. So we'll be doing that throughout this program. I did that in the previous programs, but I appreciate your emphasizing that, because there's no question, I don't want to leave the impression that we're just here to talk about the negatives or to avoid to so-called cancel out the negatives without focusing on the positive. The main thing is, what should we do on Pesach that will make it and bring it alive in the fullest sense of the word, not just mitzvah sanoshim elamoda, the mechanical and robotic. Okay. And finally, in this section, personalizing the experience, what are some prayers we can say the week before Pesach to ask Hashem for extra blessings in our lives, for a living, good health, etc.? Or the way one person wrote it, what are some prayers we can say before Pesach to ask Hashem for extra blessings for parnosa, livelihood, so we can afford to buy all the things we need for Pesach? So we don't necessarily have to add new blessings. We have what Chazal and the Anshe Knesset Agdela have established for us. So in addition to obviously the three tefillas b'chol yom, 3 prayers every day, and with additional kavanah and attention, as I mentioned before, in addition to learning, because we prepare for Pesach already a month before, definitely 2 weeks before, definitely 1 week before, whether it's learning Hilchas Pesach, the laws of Pesach, the Chassidus, the Pnimius of Pesach, so all that is part of making a keli for all the brachas. And then, of course, Mitzvah Pesach, Kimcha de Pischa, helping people prepare for Pesach, informing people, educating people, which can be done in person, it can be done online, many different ways. We also have the Nasi that we say every day, starting from Rosh Chodesh Nissan. So that's an additional prayer. The Hirotzen we say. So all this draws down, as we all know, this is the keli when you daven, the keli for Hashem's brachas, including for parnosa, to be able to celebrate a beautiful Pesach together. So you don't have to, that's an addition. The Nasi is an addition. And of course, as we come closer, the day before Pesach, there's the additional things we do with B'dikas chametz and then Bir chametz and the Seifas chametz and saying the Haggadah, the Shabbos before Pesach. This year it's Erev Pesach, part of the Haggadah we say. And the other customs that are all part of preparing for Pesach. All that makes that keli. But say it with kavanah, with intention, not robotically. Okay. With that, let me move to, as I said, I'll do it by subjects. I'm going to go now to chametz. Then we're going to talk about the Seder, the last days, and then a few general questions. Hopefully we'll get it all in. I'm not sure if I can. covered already a lot, but I'll try to get as much in as possible. And this is also only a tip of the iceberg of what the questions that came in. I wish I had more time, but we'll cover as much as we can. Some very interesting, unique questions as well. Let's start with chametz, because that's what we do the days before Pesach as we clean. And then from that we prepare the ground as we enter into Pesach, which is also a general interesting take on this whole thing. Sur Maran Asay Tev. Before you bring in new energy into your life, you have to make sure you have to get rid of the dirt. Like, you're not going to bring in new furniture into a dirty house. You have to clean it up. Call it tshuva tata before tshuva ilah. In this case, we clean the house for chametz, which means not just physical chametz, also ruchniisdik, ego, arrogance, and so on. So then, when it comes Pesach night, or Pesach Erev Pesach, we are ready to now bring in this whole new energy of Zman Cherosenu that comes with the Seder and with matzah. So before you bring matzah into the house, you have to first get rid of the chametz. So let's talk about that. Why are we forbidden from eating chametz? So that's, of course, the first obvious question. So the Torah tells us, you could say it's Gzeirus HaKosov. The Eibishter says, how do you celebrate Pesach? There should be no se'er, you shouldn't find any leavened bread. And Chazal explain what that means and all the aspects of it for these days, the 7-8 days of Pesach. Technically, there are many reasons given for this, but let's go straight to what Chassidus says. The chametz symbolizes the inflated ego of bread, the air that it's filled with. Matzah is the antithesis to that. You don't allow it to rise. To experience true chayrus, freedom, you have to get your ego out of the way. So the obsession, if you wish, of getting rid of every crumb is really getting rid of every crumb of ego. To reach a state of total humility. That's what makes you a keli for geula. As long as you're filled with yourself, even partially, you can't really have geula because you're then your own worst enemy, so to speak. A person who's entangled cannot untangle themselves. You can't solve a problem with the system where the problem was created. So you need to free yourself. Get out of your comfort zone. Get out of your ego. That's the most basic explanation. And we do so to the extreme. And as I said, there are different Sefardim talk about different explanations. Api Musar, Api Pshat, Remez, Drus, Sod. So that brings to the next question. Why are there extra chumras on Pesach more than all year round? To the point where the Alter Rebbe even writes in Shulchan Aruch that in general you don't go overboard with chumras. But on Pesach, a chumra is not to be dismissed. So the simple reason is based on Arizal. He says, Kol hazoyer b'mashahu. Whoever is careful, even with a mashahu, like a smidgen of chametz, is huftach is promised that he will not do any sins all year round. Why? Because chametz again is connected to ego. In the Zohar it says chametz is connected to the Yetzer Hara. Matzah is the nefesh halikis, the Yetzer Tov. The se'er shebe'isa, as the Gemara puts it. The yeast in the dough that's allowed to rise. Now keep in mind, ego is not a bad thing, but the rest of the year we do eat chametz, we do eat bread. But there's once a year, like we spoke earlier, that focus of total humility, being avodim atem v'lei avodim la'avodim, avdei Hashem, tzivus Hashem, as Yidden were called when they marched out of Mitzrayim. And that's why there's more chumras than any other time of the year. And especially around the avoidance around chametz to the extreme, but also in the chiyuv. How matzah is eaten, how we're careful, but all around that. So the more you're in love with something, the more you protect it. It's called shmura matzah. You protect it. Shmira. The first night of Pesach is called Leil Shemurim, the night of protection. Because you love your child, You don't just say, okay, I love my child, I'll protect it 90%. All the way. You ever see how a mother or a father, they clean their little child? You want between every toe, every little piece of dust. That's what you do when you're in love. When you don't understand the love, it can become something negative because you become obsessed and you don't even know why. But the real reason why is that because you want to connect more. The deeper the love, the more care you take. The Kodesh Kadoshim, such a holy place, even one piece of dust, even one small flaw could cause, we know what it could cause, that the Kohen Gadol had to be bound because if there was no such flaw, he would not live. Revav al beged Talmid Chacham, a piece of dust on the garment of a Talmid Chacham is like a piece of dust on the eye. It's not like on your finger where it's meaningless. On the eye, it's very irritating. So, therefore, those chumras, which leads to another question where somebody wrote, what is the reason the Chazal added the chumra of not eating chametz starting the morning before Pesach begins? Erev Pesach in the morning. Is it because they were afraid someone's clock might be wrong and someone might be guilty of an Isser Daraisa if they thought it was still Erev Pesach for another hour and they ate a falafel or chametz, but then the real time was an hour later and Pesach started already? But with that logic, why didn't Chazal add fences to Erev Shabbos and make us start keeping Shabbos Friday morning so there's less chance someone with a broken clock would violate an Isser Daraisa by violating Shabbos? So I already explained why more chumras on Pesach than on Shabbos or other times. There is the concept of Tosfos Shabbos, but obviously it's not from the morning. It's a few minutes or a little time before Shabbos for the similar reason. But here when it comes to Pesach, we're much more careful because chametz is all year round you eat chametz. So you need, like, so to speak, if you think of it like a runway. The plane doesn't just take off. Psychologically, if you stop eating chametz in the morning, more likely you're going to be much more careful. If you say only 18 minutes before lichtzin, much easier to nichshel, God forbid, to be nichshel, to fall through. So that's on a very balbatisha level, that you give it many hours. So the whole day of Pesach becomes a Pesach Dika type of day, even though it's not technically Pesach yet. Again, when you love someone, that's what you do. You go the extra mile. And Pesach is more unique than any time of the year for this reason. Remember, Pesach is when talking about children, that's when Am Yisrael was born. Goy Mikerev Goy, so it's the care for a new child. Chesed Nurayich is special and extra. Okay. Now, let's go from chametz. We talk, then comes the night before of Pesach. Well, yeah, this year it'll be, since Erev Pesach is Shabbos, so the night before, Thursday night, is b'dikas chametz. So someone asks, why do we use a feather, spoon, and candle when searching for chametz? So the technical reason, if you look it up, you'll see, is the feather represents like a brush. Since chametz can break down and becomes crumbling to crumble, you can't always get it with your fingers, so it's like a brush. That's what you use a brush for. And brushes were made from feathers. That's what they used back then. So you could say, why don't we use a brush? Okay, it's also to be mekayim, that something that Yidden used always was a feather, technically. The spoon is like think of it like a dustpan, in which you place the chametz. So it's symbolic of that. What it does say in Sefardim is that also, in case you don't find any chametz, today we have the 10 pieces we put out, so we always find something. So you don't want to make a bracha and not find any chametz, so the wood is, of course, flammable. So when you burn the next morning, you have always something to burn. And finally, the candle is, of course, to find in every crevice. Now you could say electricity can do that, but it's symbolic of that. But on a deeper level, if you think about it, that the search for chametz is not just you're looking for chametz. You're doing it in the fullest sense of the word. It says the Alter Rebbe would spend hours to look for chametz. So obviously he was looking for gashmizdik and ruchnisdik chametz. And what do you spend hours? So how do you do it? So you could say the wooden spoon is like the keli. The candle is like an oir that illuminates. Like we say, oir l'arba asar. I believe it says in Turbarekas, other Sefardim, oir l'arba asar, to bring light into a dark corner. The dark corner of chametz, like we said before, that is connected to the Yetzirah. And the brush or the feather represents like a tashmishe mitzvah, so to speak, an instrument, a tool that helps you clean. And the main thing is to know is this: that's not just the chametz itself, but it's also the brush, the feather, and the keli, the wooden spoon, and even the candle. Like some people say, why the candle? Why are you burning the candle? Because if you use that candle to go find chametz, that candle should, yes, it was used for a good purpose, but that candle tells you you're looking for negative things. The candle is also part of, let's eliminate that whole process. And that's the beer that we then put it into fire. We're burning it with the chametz. We're burning everything that was associated, not just with the chametz, but also finding the chametz. So even though, yes, you need a witness at times to tell you someone did something wrong, but the fact of the matter is that's not what you celebrate. At some point, that witness, we have to forget. We have to move on and focus on the positive. I see I'm not going to be getting to many other questions because time is running close. So let me just say, why don't Ashkenazim eat kitniyot, which generally means legumes, generally beans like rice and so on, while some Sefardim do? So the technical reason again is because there was a time that the Chazal decided they didn't want to confuse. Because the similarity, grain can look very much like rice. Same thing with beans. And it was also processed in similar kelim and instruments and containers. So to avoid any chash, that's what was added. Sefardim didn't have this problem, so they didn't add it. Alter Rebbe writes somewhere that Sefardim Bechlal have less chumras than Ashkenazim because they had less challenges from the golas that they were in. But Baruch Nish, you have to say, again, going back to what I said before, the chumras, that love indicates you don't just do the minimum, you do the maximum. So even though today you could say, what do you mean, kitniyot? Today we have machines, we have an industrialization, we have all kinds of ways to know. And you have mashgichim and so on. But it's a matter of love. It's a minig Yisrael that became a minig Yisrael. You love something. So so you're avoiding the legumes. So Baruch Nis demonstrates when you love your child, you don't let the child do certain things that are destructive. You don't even let them get close to something that's destructive. So think of it more the gavra, the person. It's not so much because the kitniyot is not chametz, and there's a lot of halachas around that. However, for us, we treat it as such, just to show how much we want to completely eliminate not just chametz, but anything that may look like it even. Marisayan, that even looks like a ego, not just that which is actual ego. Now, why Sefardim? First of all, it's different minhagim in different places. Not all Sefardim. And as I said before, at times you have less challenges, so you don't need to take on every chumra. Why don't we eat gebrokts? Same idea. Gebrokts is what's called matzah shruya. Interesting, gebrokts comes from the word like broken. Because gebrokts means, the technical reason is, because the matzahs that were baked could have had some flour that's still loose. So if you put any water on it, you could the chash of turning into chametz even on Pesach. If there's any flour, even a speck. So you just avoid that whole thing. But again, the main point here is not the technical. The main point is the deeper reason. Why Bechlal, minig Yisrael? Why is it so valuable? Teruhu. Because it came from a loving place. We're being careful. We want to avoid any ego. We want to avoid anything that's antithetical to Hashem. Achar Pesach is another discussion. And then the Rebbe Mahadir. Because remember, it's not after the Shivas Yomim of the 7 days of Pesach. And keep in mind again, like I said earlier, bread itself, after Pesach, is a complete, not just mutter, it's a mitzvah, and Shabbos and so on, Shtei Alechem, the Korban Shtei Alechem, Shvuos. Okay. So now let's go over to the Seder. I'll cover a few things as much as I can. Really running out. I thought I'd be able to cover a lot more. So I apologize. But so be it. Hopefully what we spoke about is valuable and helpful. Did the Rebbe ever tell us what his favorite part of the Seder is? This goes back to the question that someone asked about the positive and the negative. That there's the negative to avoid the positive. So I don't think I ever heard from the Rebbe or heard from anyone tell me that the Rebbe had a favorite. I don't know if there was a favorite. A Seder is a mitzvah from beginning to end. And those that saw the Rebbe Prava Seder, which was quite awesome, saw the dvekus, the chayis, especially after the 6-day war, they say, the Rebbe said the second half of the Seder, the Hallel, and so on. So overall, so I wouldn't look at favorite. You know, they asked the Rebbe once, what is his favorite tefillah? He said, Moeda'ani. But I don't know if we can find that about the Seder. However, as Chassidim, things that we saw the Rebbe do, in how he ate the matzah, the amount of matzah, we saw that motor and so on, obviously a special affinity to. Why do we eat matzah? Due to it being the bread of affliction, lechem eini, because that's like the bread that they ate in Mitzrayim as avodim, as slaves, or due to the Jews not having time to wait until the dough rose. As the Pasuk says, Lo Yizman, they had no time, they had to run out of Mitzrayim. There was no time for them to wait till the dough would rise. As another person writes it, where did the idea begin and spread that the reason we eat matzah is because our dough didn't have time to rise as we rushed out of Egypt? When clearly the real reason is Hashem commanded us to eat matzah with the Korban Pesach. So first of all, where does it rise? With all due respect, it's the Pasuk and Torah. So the answer is both aspects are correct. There's both aspects. It's a bread of humility, period. And even had they not been rushing, we would still have matzah. And in addition, it also has that element. I'm not letting it, because as I said before, not letting it rise is basically the battle against the ego. Even had they not rushed, it should be valuable. So some places in Chassidus, it talks about there's the matzah lifnei chatzeis, la'achrei chatzeis. So la'achrei chatzeis is because they were rushing. Lifnei chatzeis because that's what the Eibishter said. Al Pesach, matzah samarum yechlu, regarding the Korban Pesach. So basically, matzah has many aspects to it. Because you could ask the question, they rushed then, that's why today we shouldn't eat it. We should have to eat it. The rush then is kiborach ha'am, as Chassidus explains in Tanya and other places, because the klipa was so strong they had to leave immediately. And therefore forego even the bread rising a bit. Because you could ask the question, after hundreds of years in Golus, a few more seconds, a few more minutes, they can't wait. Yes, that's exactly when the time of Geula comes and they stayed one more second, it says they would maybe not been able to leave altogether. Goes back again that this gets to an extreme even when you live in such decadence of Erev Pesach. How does eating certain foods such as matzah, horseradish, and charoset dip align our souls with the energy of freedom from slavery? So because of time, I will refer you, as I mentioned, if you go to meaningfullife.com and type in Passover Seder or Pesach Seder, I actually have a breakdown of how each part of the Seder, including these foods and other customs and things that we do, are all part of the process of reaching Yetziyas Mitzrayim v'Gvulim, transcendence in simple English, to transcend ourselves. But briefly, matzah is humility, the opposite of chametz. Morer, as the Alter Rebbe explains, is compassion. That's why it's in the middle of the Seder plate. It's not just to remember that they were in pain, but it's having empathy. And charoset, you dip it into charoset. Charoset is a mixture of the nuts and the wine, like a paste. That is a zecher for the tit, which is the bricks and mortar that they built. But it's also, a chassidus, it's a mixture of sweet, that sweetens, so to speak, the mortar. Because you don't just want bitterness, you want to also have the sweetness of the wine, which is also connected to the daled cases. All this is critical for the neshama's journey toward freedom. Now, as I said, limited time, so I wish I could have gone through many more things. I have a whole list I was going to go through. Hey, what can I say? I'll just do maybe one or two more quickly. Is eating matzah on Pesach a rectification of the sin of eating from the tree of knowledge? And that would be based, particularly because one of the opinions in the Gemara, Medrash, that the Eitz Hadas was chito, wheat, a weak stalk. There's another opinion that it was grapes, and that's also connected to the wine on Pesach. And there's the esrig is the third opinion, and te'ena, the fig, is a fourth. But according to this, it is a tikkun. And Tzedakah says in the Sefardim, I was able to find it in Pri Tzadik from Tzadik HaKohen. It may be in other places. If anyone has a source, please let me know. And also, to Tzech in the Zohar that I cited earlier, Zohar Chelik Beis 40, I think it's 48b. He talks about the mystery of the difference between chametz and matzah. He says, this Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Tov. The Yetzer Hara we know is connected to the Nachash. Interesting that the Nachash is also symbolized in when Moshe comes to Parei, the Nachash turning into a mata, to a staff, and vice versa. So it all represents the negative. This and therefore, Eitz Hadas, that they ate from, they shouldn't have eaten from, is mesukin when we eat afka matzah and not chametz. Because chametz is Yetzer Hara, the Nachash that instigated inside of them to eat from it. Next question. Why do we call them 4 questions when there are actually 5, including nishtana? So it seems like the first question, then come the 4. In the Seder, the Chabad custom, we have the 4, which is matbilin, matzah, morer, and mesubim. But the answer is very obvious. Nishtana is a klolesdika question. That's why you find when our custom, what do we say? Tatich val badifregen the 4 kashas. Nishtana alayla zem kol aleilas. They should have said nishtana before the 4 kashas, because nishtana is laying out the general question. How is it different? Why is this night different? And how is it different? 4 different ways. We dip twice, we eat matzah, we eat morer, and we recline. And that's why it says in Kabbalah and Chassidus that's connected to Dalet Elemis. Not Hey Elemis, Dalet Elemis. Atzilus B'ri, Yetzirah Nasiyah. And that also answers another question. Someone said, why are there 4 questions? Because we want to break it down, and the birurs, you want to say, the birur, the clarity that comes by asking the questions, shaylas chacham chesed tshuva, and from the questions we come to the answers, to be not just in general. You want to go into specifics. And you want to go through each world. Atzilus, B'ri, Yetzirah, Nasiyah. You want charoset in each one of them. Why do we say that during the year we don't dip even once, when in fact we dip the challah into salt? So first of all, the dipping here has a liquid element to it. It's a tefillah. Even though you could say the same idea with salt, and there's a mime from the Alter Rebbe, the Rebbe spoke about it once, but it's fort not. Salt is salt. Here it's karpus and Salzwasser, salt water, and even modern charoset is a liquidy, becomes a paste, a moist paste. And the key here is that you're being tevel either something from Adama, we do onion or potato, into salt water. Basically, Adama, Ofar, from Mina Ofar into Minha Mayim, water. And the same thing with morer, which is vegetable, semeach, into a paste that also has to have a certain level of moisture. That's the tefillah. I believe there's maybe discussed this in a sefer, in a maimer. I'm not sure for sure the difference, but I'll check it out. And if I find it, I'll respond. If somebody knows, let me know, and I'll share it. I'll conclude with the last days of Pesach, simply due to time. I just can't cover it all. The last days, what is the connection between the last day of Pesach and Moshiach? So we know, first of all of Pesach is connected to Mashiach. B'Nisan nigalu, b'Nisan asidin ligal. In Nisan we were redeemed, and Nisan we will be redeemed. Called Chedesh HaGeula. Kimeit Seischem Eretz Mitzrayim arenu neflois. As it says in Micha, the prophet says, just as it was in the days of Mitzrayim, I will show you wonders, lo'asid loving. So there's a correlation between the Geulas Mitzrayim, the first Geula, say Goel Rishon, Goel Achrim. Who Goel Achrim? Moshe, Mashiach. It's all Geula. The Geulas Mitzrayim, Pesach Hasat Sinir, it opened the channel of Geula. Yetziyas Mitzrayim. And that's why many places, Kimeit Seischem Eretz Mitzrayim, Eila Masei B'nei Yisrael Sheyotzum Mitzrayim. The 42 journey, only the first journey was out of Mitzrayim, because all of Golas, all journeys are a continuation of Mitzrayim. All Goliaths are called on the name of Mitzrayim. So the Geula Mitzvah Vashlema is built on Mitzrayim, will be a greater Geula. That's all of Pesach. And that's why the Seder, you see Taka, the second half of the Seder, makes reference a number of times to the Geula Mitzvah Vashlema. So even the first days of Pesach, we're already talking about it. But as we come to the second half of Pesach, the Rebbe explains, then the Geula HaSidah becomes more dominant. And especially Shvi Shal Pesach, we talk about Oz Yoshir, Shir Sayam, Oz Yoshir, Mekan, L'tchis HaMesim Min HaTeirah, Oz in the future. And then comes, of course, Achron Shal Pesach, where the Haftarah of Achron Shal Pesach is all about the Geula Mitzvah Vashlem Mashiach. And of course, Sudas Mashiach, that the Baal Shem Tov instituted at the end of Achron Shal Pesach. And with that, I think is a good way to conclude this pre-Pesach, special Pesach edition of MyLife Chassidus Applied. Everyone should have a kosher Freilich and Pesach, a Geula Dike Pesach, first Geula Pratis, above all Geula Klolis, for Klal Yisrael, for the entire world, especially in Eretz Yisrael. Geula Amitis Vashlema B'Nisan Asidin Li Goyel. And as I said, we won't be here the next 2 weeks because of Yom Tov, but in 3 weeks we will resume, hopefully in the Geula Amitis Vashlema, and continue MyLife Chassidus Applied every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. Kosher Freilich and Pesach.